All right, in this study we're going to begin to look at spiritual dynamics and dealing with evil spirits or demons as they're also known. And let me begin by saying there have been very few weeks over almost 30 years where we've not been dealing with demons in some sort of a setting or another. And so over that time we've come to some understandings as how they generally operate. So as we begin to discuss the connection between evil spirits and ministering to people, I just want to make a couple of points very clear up front. Firstly, we don't go into a ministry session looking for demons, generational problems, or entry points from any other kind of source. If we come from a methods or this is what you do, follow this process type training, we'll often gravitate towards being directive and preempting what the problem might be. So, and I have seen ministries that work through a particular list of demons, or we break this or that, and that's their standard ministry model. And many times they see very few or at best limited results. So we begin with, what is your problem? And along the way we may become aware of demonic power being involved, but even when these spirits are discerned, our primary interest is the ground, terrain, activity or belief that gives them place and not the spirit itself. We need to remember the devil and his demons are completely and utterly, totally defeated, and there is no other way to regard them at all. We see in Luke 10:19 that Jesus said, and if he said it, then we know it's true, I've given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. Now, if you accept those verses, then our complete authority over Satan is obvious. The only thing that remains to be done then to ensure your freedom is to identify the topos as it is in the Greek, or the ground that the devil has been given to stand on, and then resolve it. So to reinforce this position and this thinking, let's take a look at Colossians 2:15, which says, "And having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross." So if we again believe that, we can accurately say then that for a believer, the devil is not the problem. Rather, it's the area of our thinking or inner believing that gives him ground or a place and deceives us into moving our will towards participating with him. That's the actual problem. So we're really not demon focused. Instead, we're targeting the presenting problem that a person carries, being aware that at times it may be empowered and amplified by an evil spirit. Now, our mission in co-laboring to set the captives free is to resolve wrong believing and areas of deception as we work under the ministry and direction of the Spirit of Truth, who puts his finger on the problem. And we see Jesus say in Luke 11:20, "But if I cast out demons with the finger of God, surely then the kingdom of God has come upon you." So examining beliefs at heart level is, I would say, the quickest way that I've ever seen to expose the ground that's held by many of the evil spirits that you're likely to deal with. So the beliefs themselves may be the ground for the demons, or the resultant sin choices and reactions and behaviour may also give them a place. All right, so as we've said before, we need to acknowledge the spiritual or unseen realm. And as we begin to look at this area, we shouldn't have a problem with seeing the world is being manipulated from this unseen realm. I can only imagine the thousands of mobile phone calls, SMS messages, radio waves, emails, television station transmissions, Facebook pictures and so on that are all around us, or even me, in this environment in the invisible realm at any one time. If you add to that the unseen power of gravity, prismatic color, temperature, magnetic fields, static electricity, etc., 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 there is indeed a great deal that we cannot see that affects our world. Now, I cannot see how a television remote changes the channels, or other little gadgets might put up your garage door. I don't even know how they work really, but I know they do it. And there's something unseen that goes between this and the unit that causes something from over here to affect something over there, but we can't actually see what's happening. So all of these invisible things, and we've not even mentioned unseen spiritual beings interplaying and manipulating the world system through mankind, I might add. So what are demons or evil spirits? All right, although many people have various theories about what demons are and where they come from, the Bible does not specifically state any of this. It does, however, reveal their nature and activities, and also how we are to deal with them. So by observation, however, we can say that they are bodiless spirits, and the terms demon, evil spirit, or even unclean spirit, according to the famous Bible teacher Derek Prince, are all interchangeable. So to be demonized is considered to have or be under the influence of an evil or unclean spirit or a demon. Some early translations used phrases such as possessed with devils or possessed with the devil. Devils is considered to be a mistranslation for demons because the person of the devil is diablos, speaking of Satan himself, and it's only used in the singular form. Demon is actually translated from daimonion or daimon, depending on the tense. So some took this to be that the devil possessed the entire person, whereas in reality, demons often possess or control only certain areas of the human personality or body. So in truth, the believer is redeemed and possessed only by Christ. So the control of these areas is something we would say is by degrees, ranging from perhaps one part of the person having some strongholds through to possibly many areas. So mostly, though, we would say demons are not always manifested, or in other words, that they're not seen all of the time. And as an example, let me tell you a story. A long time ago, I used to work with a man who, in a particular given situation, would suddenly exhibit demonic facial and also behavioral changes. He was, in fact, a very good man who had an unresolved problem area that appeared only on, as I say, rare occasions when particular circumstances presented. Now, at the other end of the scale, I've worked with an extreme case where all that was constantly visible was demons, and where the person virtually was completely run by evil spirits. But again, this is extremely unusual, and I've never seen another case even close to this level of demonization, although I'm sure they're out there. But we can say that usually the demons hold areas of the person in soul or body. So if we liken the personality to your neighbourhood, most of the houses are fine, but there are one or two residences that are a bit noisy and perhaps have wild parties. So sadly, we can't normally arrange evictions for these neighbours as we can with demons. So we can say that these spirits without bodies can hold areas that have become available to them for inhabitation. Now, I don't believe the demons have a choice in this. It's whatever is yielded to them through some kind of agreement, weakness, or cooperation from the host. And again, I recall the late Derek Prince pointed out that a passage such as Mark chapter 5, verse 2, could also be rendered as there came a man in an unclean spirit rather than with an unclean spirit. And he's talking about Mark chapter 5, verse 2, where it says, "And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit." But if you rephrase that along the lines of what Derek Prince taught, who was very qualified in Greek, as there came a man in an unclean spirit, this helps us to open up our understanding. Years ago, a lady came to a home group that we were running, this is back in the mid-1990s, complaining of having an unusual outburst of anger. Now, armed with the information from Derek Prince's observation about being in a spirit, I proceeded to ask her if she'd been near anybody who was an angry person. Now, I'd known her for a number of years, and she always presented as a very calm sort of person, very amiable. Now, she responded that she had been with a man who was, in fact, a very, very angry person indeed, and that she had had this outburst in his company. Now, people who carry demonic spiritual dynamics will often have an almost magnetic spiritual atmosphere that you need to avoid being pulled into. It's trying to elicit a reaction in you to have some measure of control over your behaviour and manifest itself even through you, although it might be resident in another person. For example, rejection rejects. Now it's trying to get you to reject back, or pride will work on making you feel inferior. Rebellion will treat you unjustly and disrespectfully to try to create the same responses in you that gave the spirits a place in the host to begin with. Now that certainly doesn't mean that you'll automatically receive that spirit, but it does mean that it now has had an expression through you as well as the host person. Now in saying that, I want to also point out the spirit realm is a two-way street. If you're around somebody with a lot of faith, you might suddenly feel more faith than you normally have. Perhaps it's a weekend where you have a visiting ministry, but then they go away and you're left with your own faith. One day I was sitting in a group with some other pastors, and I was getting these very clear visions and pictures and strong words of knowledge for members of the group. Now, whilst I do have words of knowledge and so on, normally a vision for me would be more like just impressions. But after a while, I realised that I was seated beside a quite well-known and well-regarded prophet, and I came to the conclusion that it was my proximity to him had me sitting in his gift. And that was the reason for these abnormally clear pictures, etc., which I can say that was many years ago. I've not had them again. So in summary, we can say that we need to be aware of the spiritual dynamics of people that we're dealing with, and that discernment is our best defense against receiving or responding to someone else's junk, if you like. So you could say, as they're projecting, or the spirit in them or their spiritual dynamics is projecting onto you, trying to get a response, if you actually know what's happening, then you can refuse to receive it and respond to it. So I say you can either be like a golf ball, which is very impervious to anything. You can hit it quite hard and a long way and nothing really happens to it. Or you can be a tea bag, which soaks up everything in its environment. So you can, if you don't see what is projecting onto you, it's easy to soak up things and personalize it, whereas it's actually these spiritual dynamics trying to manipulate you. So sometimes we can see demonic influences as being something, well, let's describe them as being something beyond the normal levels of a person's problems, to being an amplified or unnatural, tangible, invisible influence coming from an unseen entity. Now, if you're aware, as I say, you can often even see the presence of a spirit on a person as a facial expression of, for example, grief. Some people have just look tragic all the time, low self-image, even lust, something like that. You can also see them in bodily language such as pride or arrogance, perhaps rebellious or aggressive attitudes. Now, although demons don't have a body, they seek a house or host to inhabit. But we can say they exhibit all of the normal faculties of a soul. They show knowledge and comprehension of, knowing Jesus, and also Paul. When we look in the book of Acts, they displayed thought and decision or will when they decided to return to their house. In James chapter 2, it says that even the demons tremble, which indicates that they have emotion. And as we've said in Legion in Mark 5, knew who he was. This spirit called Legion, he exhibited the faculties of a soul, and in this case, he had sufficient power over the vocal cords of the man to actually speak, communicate, and even express himself. So at times, for us, normally, you may be aware that speech coming from a person is demonically influenced, even though there's not complete control, as in the case of the demoniac in Mark chapter 5. Now, in these cases, it will be more of a mixture with the person's own personality, and there will not likely be a complete voice change. Just that you may discern something in the order of, I hate you, or I'm such a loser. And in these cases, the intensity of the emotion or the statement may be an indicator of a resident spirit that's powering up a belief to make it greater than it should be. So even at the minimum end of the scale, as we've already pointed out, Jesus identified the source and inspiration behind Peter's comments in Matthew 16:23 as having originated with Satan, although it was operating from outside of his person. All right, let's look at the activities of demons. Now, again, the late Derek Prince compiled this following list of activities of demons from both scripture and personal involvement with deliverance ministry, which he was spent considerable time in. And in my experience, it's completely accurate. So the first thing he pointed out was demons entice or tempt, and you'll find that in James chapter 1 and verse 14. So that's part of their work, as we said, the lure towards things that are offered by modern media, for example, like the spirits behind porn would be an example of them enticing and tempting, trying to manipulate you there. The second thing is they deceive, 1 Timothy 4:1 and 2. For example, and behind a lot of religious activity and hyper-spirituality is the deception that you have to do this or that to be good enough for God. All right, the third thing is spirits enslave. You find this in Romans 8:15, and this would include things like what we would call besetting sins, or sins that you're captive to and you can't get over, or even addictions. There'll often be a spirit behind these things. Fourthly, they torment. You'll see probably with restlessness and a lack of peace coming from fear and anxiety is a very strong example of this. And you see passages like 2 Timothy 1:7 and 1 John 4:18. But certainly fear and anxiety is one way that they can torment you. The fifth thing is demons drive or compel. People such as workaholics, for example, who simply just cannot rest and enjoy life. They always have to be doing. The sixth thing is evil spirits defile, and you'll find this in Titus 1:15. Sadly, over the years, we've seen them cause people to perform really some quite disgusting acts, but it's helpful for the person to realise that it's often a spirit that they've cooperated with somewhere along the line, and now it has a hold on that area of them that's driving them to do it. And once they realise this, they often want to be free. Okay, so we could summarise all of this by saying that demons work to deceive, oppose, destroy, and rob us of peace, and produce disharmony and division at every possible opportunity they can find. All right, as we go along in our next study, we're going to discuss whether or not a spirit is influencing us from inside or outside of our body. Okay, we'll see you soon.